Hello and welcome to today's episode of Platinum Talks Wealth. Emmy-nominated journalist Jennifer Rogers Markwell changed gears in her television career when she realized the need to help women make sense of investing. She regularly hosts educational workshops to empower women and others to take charge of their financial future. Now, join your host, Platinum Wealth Management President Jennifer Rogers Markwell, as she leads us into the world of money memories, money infidelities, and how these can mold our relationship with our personal finances as adults. Let's dive into today's episode.
Hi, it's Jennifer Rogers Markwell, and you're joining us on the Platinum Talks Wealth podcast. Today, we're joined by Jamie Vaughn.
Hey, Jennifer, thank you so much. I really appreciate your having me on the show, and I just love your podcast, by the way.
Aw, thank you. Well, tell us all about you and why you do what you do.
Yeah, that's a super loaded question. I am 56 years old, and I am a retired teacher. I taught for 20 years, teaching social studies and English, and I retired in June of 2021. And about a week after I retired from the school district, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. And so I have been in the last year and a half dealing with getting through that breast cancer. I am breast cancer free now, but and on the healing path, should I say. And I'm a podcaster.
Yeah, so amazing story, and watching you navigate that through on social media has been just, so eye-opening and so educational for folks, right? Because that's unfortunately more common than we want it to be. So watching you be vulnerable and share your experiences and what's going on and just the literacy side of what you're sharing is tremendous.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It really started as a healing mechanism, and my main mission is to educate and inspire and kind of shepherd people through that breast cancer, uh, you know, diagnosis, and even caregivers, and just be able to kind of bring awareness, way more awareness, because it really is very, very common, and women are getting younger and younger now. And so I just really I want to change the world, Jennifer.
I think you're doing it. Your podcast, obviously you're talking to folks, who are doctors, people who are going through, similar situations. Tell us more about that.
So the podcast is called Test Those Breasts, all around the premise of early detection is key. And it just is. And the earlier they can catch it, the better you'll be able to get through it. And is it easy? No. But the earlier you catch it, it's a lot less invasive on your life than it would be. So I have been really, really successful in getting surgeons from all around the country, oncologists, survivors, thrivers, caregivers, a myriad of different therapists. And it's amazing how many people are absolutely willing to tell their story and to be able to help those breast cancer patients better, get through the journey. So it has been really, really healing for me, and educational for that matter, because I certainly don't know everything. I'm learning something new every single day just from my guests. So it started on June 11th, 2023, which was the 1-year anniversary of my diagnosis. I thought that was an appropriate time to do that.
That's one of those topics, right, that people didn't discuss openly, much like money, right? Much like money memories. And that ties right into what we do here on this podcast is what's a money memory that you had as a younger person or as a child that helped mold your, relationship with money as an adult?
Right. Thank you for asking that, because I've been really deeply thinking about this. Money, when I was a kid, I don't remember my mom and dad ever arguing about money. We were always, they always provided for us. We had a home, we had food on the table, we had clothes on our back. We did things together as a family, whether it be road trips and things like that. I just never heard my parents ever argue about money, or even let alone talk about money, other than I remember my mom telling me that she tended to allot $200 per kid, and we had 3 kids, in our family to buy Christmas gifts. And I thought that was my first memory of ever really hearing about them talk about money and how much they were spending and what they're budgeting. So my parents were really good with money. I don't remember if they were ever in debt per se, other than having their house and cars to pay off and things like that. My mom, I have learned it was very, very smart with her money. When she died 4 years ago, I was sort of told that, wow, mom did a really good job with her money. So she had a financial advisor and like you, and she just, she died with money. And so when I got into high school, I remember, or actually it was more like middle school, I remember my mom bought me a pair of ditto pants. And I don't know if you ever remember dittos, but they were super popular when I was in middle school. But there was a point in time where they sort of went out and then chemin de fers came in. And I, being a girl, I wanted to wear the best and, because that's what middle school girls need to do to feel popular or whatever. My mom bought me a pair of ditto pants for Christmas and I was pissed off. I was sorry. I was just so mad because I was like, Mom, I can't wear dittos. Chemin de fers are what I need. And so she allowed me to take those pants back, but I had to save my own money, my own allowance. My parents always had chores for us and we always earned, allowance. And I had to save up to $50 to buy that first pair of chemin de fer pants. So that was my first memory of actually having to save something to get something I wanted. So
That's a good one.
yeah. And then the car, when I got my first car was $800. It was the uglier, the 75 Mustang hatchback. It was a real, it was like $800 and my parents put in 400 and I put in 400 because by that time I had a job and I paid them back with my money that I earned from my job. So I actually started babysitting when I was about 12 and I really liked the concept of making my own money like that. And so when I was 14, at that time, McDonald's was allowed to hire me. And so my first job at age 14 was at McDonald's. And I literally have never been without a job since. In fact, I've typically had 1, 2, and 3 jobs. And so I just really loved being able to make money, buy my own clothes, and, do whatever. I put gas in my car, I guess. And so, but did I know how to handle, savings or anything like that? I know I heard my parents talk about savings and things like that, but I really didn't know what to do. And I think the biggest memory that I have is when I got into college. I went to UNR over here, and I remember going into the bookstore and them handing my books for the semester, and inside the bag was a bunch of applications for credit cards. I mean, seriously, that looking back, I am blown away that they were even allowed to do that because when you get into college at such a young age, you don't know what you're doing. Like seriously. And
Yeah.
so what did I do? I applied and I got my credit cards. And boy, I pretty much spent a lot of my adult life in debt because of that.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a common story, right? I'm guilty of that too. And you hear, like, even the younger generations, you'll see the hashtag girl math, and they're like, I got a credit card and it's free money. And I bought this amazing handbag and it was free. No, it's not free. You're paying for it. And you're paying a ton of interest. Oh my gosh. Like financial literacy for us back in the day, I think was not what it needed to be by any means. Because then you'd go into a store, a department store, and they're like, you get 20% off. And you're thinking, well, I'm going to save 20% if I get this other card. And that's a good idea. No, that's not a good idea. That's a bad idea. It's a bad, bad idea.
Yeah, I feel like I never had any financial literacy in school at all. Nothing. I had math, but I certainly didn't have any financial literacy. So when I became a teacher, of course, again, my whole adult life, most of it anyway, I was in debt. And at some point in time when I was teaching social studies, they added to the curriculum financial literacy. And I have to tell you, Jennifer, I was so excited. By the time that happened, I was out of debt. So how that happened was first of all, being in debt really, really plays on your mental health. And I had a very difficult time sleeping at night. I was really fearful. And I remember about, I would say 7, 8, 9 years ago, one of my family members happened to have a lot of money, and he still does, but we were able to borrow money from him with the understanding that we would pay him back in a certain period of time and take that money and pay off all of our credit cards and things like that. So we did. We borrowed the money from him. We had a schedule, and we literally paid him every single month the same amount of money, and we paid off all of our debt. The only debt that we ended up having was our house. And so by the time I started teaching financial literacy to my 7th graders, I was able to safely say, I'm out of debt, and here's how I did it. And by the way, I am the best teacher ever to be able to teach you this, because I did all the wrong things first. And then I figured out how to get out of it. And so I was really, 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 that was part of my favorite part of teaching social studies, was teaching that financial literacy, because I even learned a lot from all the research that I did to be able to teach these kids.
Yeah, that's huge. And I feel like, again, that's just a, tip of the iceberg. We need to have way more financial literacy out there and available. And that's one reason I wanted to do the podcast too, is just to share, because it's been such a taboo subject where people don't want to talk about money or finances. But there's all these stories. What's a financial infidelity that you either experienced or that you've witnessed that you think others could learn from?
I've been married for almost 20 years, and my husband and I bought this house together. We've bought cars together. We've raised kids together. We've spent money secretively. And I bought things that I probably shouldn't have bought. We've looked at the bank account. We're like, what the heck? Why don't we have, we don't do that anymore. We've learned from that. But we really, really, like, I know he's bought things that he hasn't told me about. And I would say the biggest thing, I actually know couples who have had serious marital problems because of their infidelities. They don't tell each other what they're spending, and they don't consult with each other. And you just have to. It's like the big, huge elephant in the room. And it's like having an alcoholic in the house or something like that. It's a big elephant in the room that you have to talk about, because if you don't, it's just going to weigh more and more on your mental health and the marriage. And ultimately, that's not going to fare well in the end. And it can lead to illnesses, to be honest with you. It really can. And so, the biggest thing with me and my husband is I thought I know that I was being honest with him. We were investing in something, and we thought that it was a good deal, and it ended up falling through. We lost, quite a big chunk of money, and we still talk about it to this day. We even go to therapy, and it's come up in therapy. And I'm glad that it did, because we need to talk about these things. Money is so important even though some people are like, money sucks, it's terrible, but it's so important to have, especially needing to be able to set yourself up for your future, because of medical problems. With my breast cancer, it just came on like gangbusters all of a sudden. And if anyone knows anything about having an illness like that, it's expensive, and you can't live paycheck to paycheck. Now, I understand that people do, and there are things that people can take steps to be able to put things aside and try to set themselves up the best way they can. But the money infidelities are very, very tough on relationships, and just need to talk about them.
Yeah,
Get it out.
you bring up several good points there. I mean, that's one of the major reasons for divorce, is having, money issues, right? That's a big weight for a lot of folks. And if you would have had that conversation, and if it would have made sense to have emergency money on the sidelines, like that would be your first line of defense to lean into in many situations. But again, that's why I urge everyone to have the conversations, communicate with each other, make sure you're on the same page. I mean, we talk through so many other taboo subjects. We talk about sex, we talk about, drinking and whatever else. Again, healthcare is getting more, literacy there too, but like money was always on the back burner. And now it needs to come front and center, truly.
It does. And, you bring up a good point too. You bring up a good point too that, breast cancer, when people, and I only say breast cancer just because that's what I had. I understand that other illnesses as well. But when I say breast cancer, 40% of people go through split up. They divorce because of diagnoses like that. And I know that part of it is because the other person really has a difficult time showing up for their spouse. And part of that is money, because we are spending money, a lot of money, especially if you don't have good insurance, and so money plays a big role in that. And so again, it's important to be able to talk about all of these things and write things down, maybe even see a financial advisor to be able to set yourself up for success for these illnesses. Because when it all comes down to it, we're all going to have to deal with an illness at some point in time, right?
Yeah.
There's no really getting around that.
Yeah. Thank you for just sharing. I appreciate that so much, so much. And for all that you're doing too, for sure. So as we start to wrap the conversation, one thing I like to end with is, what are some tips and or tricks that you use to utilize money differently in your own household?
So we use credit cards. We have two. I have one for the podcast that I use for business type stuff. And then we have one, I finally got my husband to start using it because instead of his debit card. So we don't use our debit card. We use our credit card, and we got one that has 5% back. But with the understanding that you absolutely have to pay the whole entire thing before the end of the period. You have to be able to do that so that you do not get any interest rates. So I've become really, really good at not getting myself into debt again. And I'm talking, we've been out of debt. We paid off our house before I retired, which is one of the biggest reasons we were able to get me to retire and my husband to retire. I did have expenses for the breast cancer. So, I had to GoFundMe at some point so that I could help pay for my insurance, because I still pay $800 a month for insurance. And so that's a big chunk, and I took a pretty good pay cut when I did retire, but we were able to make it happen. And with the help of my friends and family, I was able to pay off some of those expenses for breast cancer. But pay off your credit cards. Do not let it roll over to the next month. Get something where you're going to get cash back. Do not get yourself into debt anymore. And definitely get yourself a financial advisor. I think that if you need that education, you've got to sit down with someone, especially you, Jennifer. I've sat down with you before and talked to you about some things. And, you have a lot of really great advice, and you clearly care about our community, especially doing this podcast. So I just think that people need to be a lot more educated and then do the right things, take the right steps. And if you are in debt, make sure that you figure out a way to pay that debt off as soon as you possibly can, and be open with your spouse and yourself.
Communicate. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for making time to chat with us.
You are so welcome. Thank you, Jennifer. And I appreciate your doing this podcast, and thank you.
Of course. No, my pleasure. And hopefully those of you watching or listening will join us on the next Platinum Talks Wealth podcast.
If you enjoyed today's podcast, Platinum Talks Wealth, please subscribe and share. For more information about Jennifer Rogers Markwell or Platinum Wealth Management, please visit www.platinumwealth.net. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. The guest speakers and their companies are not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Platinum Wealth Management.